Hello, rugby fans. I'm Joe Harrington at FloRugby. With me, as always, is Philip Benden Ormain in the UK. Another terrific week of rugby on the platform and around the world. And we have to start with the match that we said was going to be the match of the year. And for about 65 minutes, it was the best match of the year. And then just that watershed, I don't know, avalanche of Springboks, if you want, just collapse all over Paris. That was a pretty impressive final 15 minutes for the Springboks there. Uh, Philip, is there any opposition now between now and the start of the World Cup in 2027 of who the number one team in the world is?
No, I think I was pretty confident on the last preview that the Bucks would get the job done. I thought it would be by about 4 points, Joe, but what they did in Paris was so impressive. And France have come out and said, we were undercooked, which is, a valid argument, and South Africans won't want to hear that, which is fair enough. But I always thought, even at both teams at their peak, South Africa are a better side. Very hard to see anyone stopping them at the moment. The only thing I would suggest, and I don't really believe this, but if you're looking for something to cling on to, perhaps the Bucks are at their absolute peak now because they've got a whole pile of world class generational players who are coming towards the end. The only thing is they've also got a very good batch of young players coming through. I don't see anyone stopping them between now and 2027, but come the World Cup, I could see some opposition for them from, the likes of France and New Zealand, Ireland, England. Everybody's kind of in a rebuild. So, but yes, the Boks are just so impressive at the moment, and they're very quickly closing the gap to the great All Blacks team of all time.
Here's what I don't buy from France saying they're undercooked in that they looked as even and as good as the Springboks were for 65 minutes. Like they were talking at halftime about just how great this match was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but France had the lead at half, right? So it's like I don't buy the undercooked thing. I think that the Springboks just came up big at the end of the match.
True. Yeah, no, you can definitely say that, Joe. And I think it's the same as Ireland All Blacks the week before. I can see the argument on both sides, but I agree. I think, if you think back to Chicago, Ireland were leading New Zealand at half time, and it was the same sort of thing. The Southern Hemisphere teams just closed it out quite a bit more. So, yeah, really interesting. Really interesting. And yeah, I'm not going to make excuses for France. We've heard, we've all waxed lyrical about how good they are, how much depth they have. When push came to shove, it almost looked to me that the French just lost their spirit because South Africa wore them down. Also, bearing in mind that Lou Diago was shown a red card, for a high shot, which was a red card. It was the right call. But South Africa didn't look any worse with 14 men, So they're just so impressive at the moment. They're just such an impressive side.
It it reminded me a lot in sports when a team loses the lead late and then it just all just falls apart. That's what happened with France. We see that all the time in American football. You're leading all the way and then just boom, it just changes like that. And when South Africa took the lead late in the final 15 minutes, like I don't want to say France like gave up. I don't want to say that, but it was over. Then I think France had lost momentum and South Africa just completely took over.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there's going to be questions now about Fabien Galtier pretty soon. I know I
When
always
is
seem
there
like
not?
well, this is true. This is true. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but this has been in theory a generational French team, and they were knocked out of their own World Cup at the quarterfinals. And they've won two Six Nations under him, but really they've had a squad good enough to probably win it most years. Obviously, Ireland were at their peak for quite a while there. Now England are the coming force in Europe, so there's a bit of pressure on him. But South Africa just they know how to win these big games, and they've Rassie's really threaded the needle nicely between hanging on to the experienced guys for long enough to kind of bring the younger guys up to speed, and then having the younger guys ready to take over, which other teams have not necessarily done as well.
And I guess we just have to address the $1 million question here. If Dupont had been in that game, is the result any different? Because I don't really think so.
No, I don't think so either. I think the Bok pack was so dominant. I think you could also, if France get back Dupont and South Africa get back Oxnuche, there's another big guy for them, and the box scrum was dominant, but they did change Boan Venter very early in the match, so they wouldn't have done that with Ox. So yeah, very interesting sort of back and forth, I guess, on that.
Yeah, we were talking about this match and in the first half, and I think we're all gushing about the French team they were ready to play. And then I'm just looking at who's on the South Africa bench.
Mm.
And it's like they got RG Simon just like sitting there, and it's like that's going to be the difference. I just see the more power on the bench in the second half coming. And you're
Mm.
right. I mean, they didn't have Ox in that match. He was sent back to South Africa for an injury. I mean, yeah, the power game is just it's just ridiculous.
It's mad, and interesting. Snyman for me is really interesting, and I think it's the same with Leinster. He's a better player off the bench. He's one of those guys who just brings so much power, and also his offloading ability when bodies are starting to tire. I think he's much more effective off the bench, and I think Rassie's kind of, really going to keep leaning into that. So, and then you look at Andre Esterhuizen, who's historically a centre, and he's played in the back row now the last couple of times for the Bucks. So Rassie is the mad scientist that keeps giving to the world of rugby. He's got he started with the 7-1 bench. He's now got the 5.5 bench. It's going to be, gosh, everybody's going to be playing in the forwards by the end of it with Rassie. So yeah.
We've talked about this before. Like, you know, Bill Belichick in the NFL was always chasing Don Shula's record. You're always chasing these great coaches. When you look at Razzie, like, there's a lot of people that think he's already the greatest rugby coach of all time, but you know, who is he chasing to actually get that for sure in your book, where you can definitively say, yeah, he's probably the best rugby coach?
I think he's already the best rugby coach of all time. I don't think there's anyone he's chasing anymore, Joe. I think in the build up to 2023, he was probably. I can't even really think of anyone he might have been chasing. No, I think he's hands down the best rugby coach of all time. What he did, Joe, you've got to remember, he was coaching. Brings up some old scars again. He was coaching Munster when Ireland put a record score on South Africa. Him and Jacques Nienaber were sitting in the stands at the Aviva Stadium that day, and they said never again. And then they went back to South Africa. So it made a massive, massive difference, those guys going back. And obviously, they've just revamped the whole game in South Africa. South Africa have always had the raw materials when you look at the players they have. There's always going to be world-class players in South Africa, but they were like headless chickens under the past few coaches. Rassie comes in, he is the boss. It's not a democracy. Rassie is the dictator in that squad, and that's what you need. He is the main boss for them. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how long he stays. He can stay as long as he wants, but I can't see anyone being as successful as he is. Now, there's a lot of good young South African coaches behind him. Johan van Graan at Bath is the main man, but that's spoken about. But yeah, Rassie for me is the greatest coach of all time.
You don't think it's Nibar who was technically the coach in the last World Cup?
I think Nienaber is a phenomenal coach, but I mean, Rassie was the main man at the last World Cup. Even if Jacques was, the head coach, Rassie was. That just allowed Rassie to be the water boy and go and get his messages onto the pitch and cause a bit of chaos. Yeah, he's also, if we're talking about characters, he's a top 5 character of all time in rugby too. So that counts for something.
So for months now, we have been writing the obit for the All Blacks. We've been writing them off. We've talked about Scott Robertson's job stuff. So I'm going to ask you this question, Philip. Wait, are the All Blacks actually good? Because I thought that was probably the best. I've watched a lot of Scott Robertson matches in New Zealand. I thought that might have been the best match win of his tenure, because without Jordy Barrett playing in the hostile crowd of Edinburgh in Murrayfield Stadium, I mean, they kind of controlled that whole match. I was waiting for Scotland to get in it, but is that the most impressive win of the Scott Robertson era? And he has beaten the Springboks too, but I mean that was in New Zealand. This was in Scotland.
Yeah, I got a lot of heat, I think, in the comments for saying the All Blacks are done. I think the challenge with the All Blacks is they're always judged to a different standard, and rightly or wrongly. But they've been the standard bearers for over 100 years. They're not the standard bearers anymore. The Springboks are by quite some bit. The All Blacks are still a very good side, make no mistake. But I just don't think that they're a clear step behind the Boks. That's for sure. I think they're a clear step behind France, even after what happened with South Africa there. And I think they're more in line with England. They're probably a notch ahead of Ireland at the moment and Scotland, but they're still a very good side. They're just not the best team in the world, and I don't think that they're going to be the best team in the world with the Boks around at the moment. It'll be very interesting to see how it plays out. Obviously, they've got that greatest rivalry series next year, which will be very interesting to see how that all plays out. But yeah, they're definitely back. I think I don't want to take anything away from the All Blacks because they did what they did and they did that against Ireland too. They got over the line and they won, which is really important. And but from a Scottish perspective, Scotland to me looked like Ireland I think it was 2013. Ireland lost to the All Blacks in a heartbreaker overtime when Ryan Crotty scored a try. Aaron Cruden had two shots at a conversion actually and nailed it the second time, and Ireland just didn't beat them. And at that point, you thought, oh God, when is Ireland ever going to beat New Zealand? Scotland were on the line. They just couldn't take the step to get the All Blacks, to get past that psychological barrier with the All Blacks. It was there for them to take. And kudos to New Zealand. They won and they ground it down. And Damien McKenzie, I'm really happy for him because he's a phenomenal player who just hasn't necessarily had the backing that you would have thought with his skill level. So he scores the winning
he
try.
looked like a character from the movie 300. Like at the end of that, it's like bandages almost covering his whole eye. Still got blood coming down his face. So it's like, man, uh, where's the Snyderverse when you need him?
Well, this is it. And, a week late for Halloween. And that the one time the All Blacks wear a white jersey and he goes and ruins it. I mean, you look at that. But yeah, no, it was a really good one. Their biggest test is going to be England at Twickenham. That's going to be a real crunch test. If they get past that, they're gonna beat Wales, obviously. So that's have I got that the right way around? Yes, I do, don't I? Yeah, they got Wales and then South Africa's in the end of the block with Wales. But yes, look, they've looked good. They're just not the best team in the world. So that mantle is firmly with South Africa at the moment, and my money is still on France being the second best team when they're fully fit and firing.
I think that Scott Robertson's probably done enough. I mean,
Hmm.
you beat Ireland and Scotland away from New Zealand back to back weeks. Like I said, I was pretty impressed by Scotland against the United States. Obviously, they won 85-0, but I thought that said more about Scotland than the United States in that game. Um, maybe I'm wrong there, but I was expecting. I think I even picked Scotland to win this match based on that, and I'm just sitting there thinking okay, well that's two really good back to back wins for New Zealand. I think maybe we should chill it on writing Scott Robertson off. I get it that coaching New Zealand rugby is like coaching Alabama. Every time you lose, you're going to be on the hot seat. But I thought those were really good wins for them.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Look, they're great wins. I still have a few question marks about the All Blacks, and I think there's plenty of positives there. Richie Mo'unga is going to make a big difference when he comes back and plays 10 for them, but it's just I don't know. I think when you get rid of two assistant coaches in 2 seasons and you take record losses, it's hard to really buy in. But you never know. I think there's still look. There's still the All Blacks are always going to be an elite, like a really good team. They're just not the cream of the crop at the moment. Is my argument on that. And I know I still picked them to beat Scotland by 10 points, and I think it was close enough to that in the end. So yeah, I felt they were always going to beat Scotland mainly on the psychological side of things in the power game, which is always Scotland's Achilles heel in the end. But I think Scotland punched themselves out with that brilliant sort of 20 minutes in the second half, and they just couldn't sustain it.
All right, so I thought there was two teams that in wins really underwhelmed. I thought that they probably should have beaten both of their opponents by a lot, and instead they found themselves in some tough games. And so Ireland and England were those two teams. Fiji was on it. I mean, they were leading at parts in that game. England broke away at the end, and of course, Ireland was up big, and then Japan came back, and that was kind of that was kind of interesting. What were your take of those two games? Is it worrying signs for the two favorite teams, or were you more impressed by how Fiji and Japan played?
Yeah, I think on that with I'll start with England first. Fiji have plenty of really good players, so it was always going to be a tricky proposition. And actually, to be honest with you, Fiji did not get the rub of the green with the match officials at any point. There was, a try chalked off that was a bit pedantic for Fiji. They allowed an English try that there was no clear grounding. So, the match was actually a lot closer than it should have been. But, England grounded down. The impact of the bench was massive again for them. So that's really good for them. I think, I probably got a bit of flack. I think England have all the talent in the world in terms of the players. I'm just still not massively convinced by the necessarily the coaching structures there, but what do I know on that? So they should, Fiji are a good team. Fiji are a good team, so it was a good hit out for them. And you could also forgive them in a way for perhaps looking ahead to the All Blacks clash, which teams say they don't, but if you've got the All Blacks coming to town, you might look at that. And Fiji are a good enough team to make you pay for it. So yeah, really interesting match at Allianz Stadium, Twickenham. Then we have to call it that. In terms of the Irish side of things, Ireland, yeah, I've not been particularly impressed with Ireland from the start of this block. I wasn't particularly impressed with the squad selection coming into the block. They haven't picked players who are in form. They continually go back to the well with the old players. I am potentially the biggest proponent that Irish rugby has plenty of talent. They're just not getting chances. But one thing I would say is Ireland very rarely, even at their peak, they always kind of look sluggish in these sort of mid-range matches against Italy or perhaps later Wales. We really struggled against Wales last year, and against Japan. So we ground them down. It wasn't a great performance. The bench had a really good impact. The forwards that came off, Cian Prendergast, Sam's older brother, Jack Conan was very good. Gus McCarthy, Paddy McCarthy both scored tries. And actually the biggest takeaway for me, Joe, was Gus McCarthy sorted out the Irish lineout. So for me, that indicates that actually there is a lot of issue coming from the hookers with the throwing, and that's where the miscommunication's coming. I think Cian Prendergast should start in the 6th jersey ahead of Ryan Baird. I think Baird brings more impact. I think he's very similar to Snyman. He's a much better player in the final 20 minutes than he is for a full 80. Fly half, I thought Jack Crowley did well behind a pack that was struggling. Sam Prendergast looked like he'd found a bit of confidence, which is brilliant. But again, he was playing against a Japanese team by that stage who were pretty well beaten into the ground. And Caelan Doris was absolutely phenomenal all game. But yes, I'm worried about Ireland on a number of fronts. One, the squad is too old. That needs refreshing. And two, the game plan just doesn't look. They're just trying to play like they played 2 seasons ago, and it's not working. So, yeah.
Obviously, Caelan Doris missed the last Six Nations. He got hurt in it. So I think he's probably only going to get better the more he gets away from that injury. So it was good seeing him kind of round up into form.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And I think, I know, I'm not going to sound very original, but I'm pretty sure I said this about a year ago. I think his future is going to be in the number 7 shirt for Ireland. Is my guess. Josh van der Flier is slowly starting to show slight signs of decline post the Lions, and we've got a young kid called Brian Gleeson who was in the squad but unfortunately got injured, or he was in the extended squad. The Munster number 8, who's just an athletic freak. So I think Ireland are going to have a very, very different looking back row come the Six Nations, and I think that starts with Caelan Doris moving to the open side, Brian Gleeson slotting in at 8, and then you've got a trio of either Cian Prendergast, Cormac Izuchuku, or Ryan Baird at 6, which will be very interesting. And Thomas O'Hearn's an option there too, but I think he's a second row. So I think Ireland are going to look very different. I think now that they've secured top 6 no matter what for the World Cup rankings, I think you're going to start seeing Andy Farrell making a few changes. He's called back in Mac Hansen to the squad and Dara Murray today, which is an indicator of 2 things. Jamie Osborne got a really bad injury, which is a shame, so he's going to be out for the rest of the series. So they're worried about fullback, and Murray will slot into the lock position because the line-out's just been an absolute disaster for 2 years. So something needs to change.
One of the best matches on Saturday was Georgia versus USA. People woke up and watched that match. You saw the United States go up 21-7 at one point. It was really good. It was very clear that the United States just can't survive yellow cards, because as soon as they got a yellow card, Georgia surged ahead. Some teams can survive it, like the Springboks. Other teams, you're just not quite there. But I think the thing I took away from there is Georgia's ranked number 11, and I think they truly are probably the best team outside of the top 10, which obviously the ranking says so, but out of that you get those Sanzar teams, you get the Six Nation teams. I think that they're better. I think that they would probably beat Wales. I think that'd be a heck of a match, but I think they would beat Wales at this point. Um, my question to you, Philip, is like a team like Georgia, like what is their World Cup expectation in 2027? Because they're showing that they are the best on that team, but obviously everyone wants to get into the knockout stage.
It's hard, isn't it, Joe? I guess it works in their favor that we're going to have a round of 16, not just the quarterfinals next time. So I fully expect them to be there because, as you say, when you go outside of the Six Nations and the Rugby Championship, and let's say Fiji at the moment, because I think Georgia are on a par with Japan at the minute. Once you get outside of that top bracket of teams, Georgia are right there. And realistically, if you were going purely on performance, they should really be in the Six Nations, but there's a lot more goes into it than just that. So I think for them it's quite challenging is how many tier one matches can we get between now and Australia 2027 because that's what's going to define it for them. Because when it comes to the Rugby Europe Championship, Spain are getting much better. Portugal have dropped off a touch, so but you kind of always expect Georgia to win that competition, right? So their big tests are going to come in these windows of July and November. And they went down and played South Africa. They didn't have the greatest game down there this year, but they have, historically they've done well against tier one teams. So I think the biggest thing is just how many games can they fill in on that. On the US side of things, I thought the Eagles showed far more this week, and I not to be because we're going to get in trouble for kind of constantly apologizing for teams, but you got to remember not only did the US come up against one of the best teams in the world in Scotland, but those players hadn't played for ages. The MLR season ended a long time ago, and quite a few of those players are unattached from clubs. You were also missing David Ayanu, Jack Iscaro, who were both absent again, and they're two players who are starting in the top 14 for Toulouse and Stade Francais, which is huge in your front row. Tonga Coffey came back and made a big difference, as did Mafi Nafu, who's a phenomenal player. So I think Scott's doing exactly what you'd expect from him. He is building depth in this squad, and you could see there's not much between them and Georgia. And really, the scoreline heavily flatters Georgia. They scored that late try in overtime, and that gave them the buffer. This was a one-score game. So, big positive start for the Eagles there, and I fully expect them to beat Romania next week. And again, I think it just shows what Scott's building there. I know
Oh
that
yeah,
question started
I
about
think
Georgia,
Romania
but
is in trouble. If I
yeah,
didn't
I
say
think so.
that, they would kick me out of the country. But no, I think Romania is in trouble. I think the U.S. I was just really happy to see how they responded from going down early.
Mm.
You give up you give that try early in the game. You're like, oh no, this could get ugly. And then they just came back, and that three straight tries was one of the more impressive things I've seen USA Rugby do in a long time.
Yeah, no, I fully agree, Joe. And the other thing I would say about the Eagles is when these more for people who are maybe new to rugby, if you're watching rugby, maybe just for a fun exercise, just pick a player to kind of track, for a 5 minute spell. If you watch the Eagles, in particular their back row, the work rate that they get through is phenomenal in terms of, from touchline to touchline. They are everywhere. The Eagles work hard. It's not a lack of effort. And that game against Scotland was just came too early. I think if you were to say if we could flip the tour in reverse and we went Romania first, Georgia second, Scotland third, you're going to see vastly improved performances from the Eagles across the board there, right? So you probably, I dare I say it, probably beat Romania. You definitely beat Romania. Sorry, you possibly beat Georgia. I would assume, and then you go up against Scotland and put in a far better account of yourself. So I think it's actually we're gonna have to, like you said, you were actually the first one on it, Joe. Like we have to park that Scottish performance because I think it said a lot more about Scotland hitting the ground running than it did the Eagles. So I think there's positive signs for Eagles fans there, and yeah, just keep the faith because there's a lot of things to work out in US rugby, but you got the right people in place with in USA rugby to do so.
Okay, so I feel like one of the best matches of the year is going to happen this weekend. But you have a different match for the match of the weekend. What's your match of the weekend?
Yeah, I think Scotland Pumas is going to be something else. Two teams who love to give the ball plenty air, play very attractive brand of rugby, fast, physical, and you saw what the Pumas did in the Principality. You know Scotland are going to be hurting from that All Black loss, so I think that's going to be a phenomenal clash. I really do.
Well, look, I watched a lot of Scotland matches over the summer when they did their Pacific tour, and those were not the A players because those A players were on the Lions. But there was enough of the A players on that team to make you think, wow, when they get their top squad back, Scotland could be pretty good. But then again, we say that every year with Scotland. Um, so yeah, I think Scotland, unless they have a bit of a hangover from losing the All Blacks match, I think that they've got a really good one against Argentina, which, talk about a weird season from Argentina. You know, they beat the British and Irish Lions, but then they lose two back-to-back matches to England in the summer, and it just did not make any sense losing those matches to me. You said you kind of expected that, but to me it was like, how do you go from beating the Lions to losing to the English team without their Lions twice? Um,
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? I think I keep putting a mulligan on the Lions because it was the first time they'd got together and things like that. But then also Argentina were missing loads of frontline players, so it's kind of hard, kind of hard to to kind of give them excuses. I think with England, I kind of felt England had enough strength and depth, and psychologically England. You know, like we say in rugby, every team seems to have a bogey team, and England's Argentina's one. Argentina just so rarely beat England that I just felt kind of confident that they would go down and do it. And England were missing quite a few players to the Lions, but they still had lots of frontline players in the squad. So yeah, it'll be interesting.
now they had a pretty good bounce back. They did beat the All Blacks later in the rugby
We'll allow
championship.
them, yeah,
So
we'll allow them that.
um, okay, well, you can say that that match is really good. I'm gonna say my match of the weekend. I think it's gonna be in the running for match of the year. England All Blacks. This is how fun rugby has been because I think you can make the case that last week was the match of the year in South Africa and France, and like I said, for 65 minutes it was. Um, Here's my question: can this match be as good as France South Africa was?
Yeah, I think it can be, and I think it's coming at the right time because England have now, what was that, England's second match this weekend, so it'll be their third match. They should be fully up and running. New Zealand have lost a few players to injury, but by and large are relatively healthy in terms of the squad that they brought north. Obviously, they were missing players beforehand and lost Jordy Barrett for the rest of the tour. I think it'll be a really interesting match. The only reason I say Argentina Scotland is because I think this one has a real potential to be an arm wrestle between England and New Zealand. Um, Whereas I think Argentina and Scotland, yeah, it'll be an arm wrestle, but I think you'll see quite a few points scored in that one. Whereas I just kind of get the feeling that these two teams are going to probably slug it out more than anything else. So it's going to be a cracker for sure. There's no doubt about it. And yeah, like I said before the call, I'm meant to be at that match, so I'm looking forward to being there and seeing two teams that I have no vested interest in. So that's helpful. So it'll be really interesting to see how that one turns out.
Well, it's interesting because neither team has that power that the Springboks and
Mm.
even like Argentina has. Both of them, though, have a lot of playmakers. They can score a lot of points. I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, I kind of feel like these are pretty good styles. They're very similar styles going up against each other.
Yeah, which is really interesting because historically they would be on the polar opposite end of the spectrum, whereas now they're quite, both teams have plenty of players who can score lots of points, which I know goes against what I said at the start, but I just think it's going to be such an intriguing battle. England they've made it so clear that England are going to kick the ball. They are going to kick the leather off the ball under this Steve Borthwick regime, and rightly so because they've had success with it so far and they've got the right athletes for that. New Zealand can punish you quite early, as they did at at Murrayfield, where Cam Roygard kind of took the air out of the stadium with that early try, and they can do that to England. So it's going to be very interesting. I think when it comes down to it, the English bench for me is better than the All Black bench at the moment, although it's marginal. So it's going to be really tight either way. It's going to be a really really close match in this one, and yeah, I think it might be the first time out of our series that despite my negativity about New Zealand, that I might not back New Zealand for the first time this year. So we'll get to that later, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think that it probably helps that England did not just run away from Fiji in that game. They had a close call against
Mm.
Fiji. And we said this at the start. It's like Ireland, Scotland, England to open your autumn series is ridiculous. This is a ridiculous tough stretch. The only times we see this stretch, right, is if you're Wales or Italy in the Six Nations, or I guess France. That's just a really, really tough three straight matches. But you know what? I think that, like I said a few minutes ago, I'm pretty on the train of maybe the All Blacks aren't what they were 20 years ago, but they're still really good. And they still have a win against South Africa this year. They also like historically lost to them, but I think the win over Ireland and Scotland back to back, maybe this is how they kind of shush everyone that wants to put England at number two, because I think that people want to do that, right?
Yeah, no, I get you. I can't help but feeling that again, I felt there was a psychological thing for the Scots against the All Blacks, having never beaten them, and it was something I'd seen in Ireland previously. I think Ireland are not as good as they were the last time these teams. Oh, sorry, in 2023, and they were out of form. Whereas I think England have had two matches under their belt. They've got players in form. It's going to be a cracking match. And look, I'm not writing the All Blacks off by any means. I think it's going to be really close either way. But I think of all the teams on this tour, England's the toughest one for them this season for sure. They get past this and they've got a grand slam in the bag because they're not going to lose to Wales. So, as much as I
Man,
hate to
you
say it
know
because I
what?
love the Welsh.
Welsh fans, send all of your angry comments to Philip Enden. Okay, look.
I
Well,
actually
then
thought they
again,
did well this weekend.
I thought they did too. I thought there was a chance. That's why it's just been a really weird year for Argentina.
Yeah, yeah, and losing Jack Morgan for Wales is a backbreaker. He's their talisman, he's their best player, he's their captain. They're in trouble now for the rest of the window without him.
Well, he just needs to get back for the Six Nations because I think that's where all their eggs are in their basket of getting
Yeah.
there and you know, uh, get getting Zamet back there and yeah.
Yeah, he looked good, Reece Zammit, to be fair. He looked good this week, I thought. Yeah, plenty of pace.
Okay, let's make some picks here for week one. Now we're gonna start with some of the non Autumn Nation Series matches here. So this match streaming on Flow Rugby, 7 a.m. Eastern Time. Georgia versus Canada. Do the Canucks have any chance in this one?
No, no. Georgia are going to be up to speed and they're going to put a big score on Canada, I'm afraid, this week. Canada lost.
Still watch the
Oh,
match though,
still
because
watch it. I think it'll be look for people who don't necessarily follow teams outside of the tier one. Canada have been pretty good. They beat the Eagles earlier this year. There's some really talented players in that Canadian squad, but I feel pretty confident that Georgia get a pretty big win in this one.
how close would they be to getting into the top 10 if they won that match? They're pretty. There's a pretty big gap though. I think.
I think there's a decent enough gap, but yeah, no, I think there's too big of a gap because the problem for them is that they're ranked so much higher than Canada that they won't get enough points really to bump them up much.
All right, the United States going to Romania to take Romania on. That is a 9 Eastern. Philip, who do you have in that one?
Yeah, I've got the Eagles in this one for sure. I think they finish off that tour with a really good win, and I think it's a relatively comfortable win. I happen to notice that you didn't pick the match between your neighbours north of the border there, Joe. Before we move on, who have you got in the Canadian game? Actually, sorry, I just
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. No, I'm taking Georgia. Yeah,
okay,
sorry
good,
about that.
good.
You know what?
I'm
I'll say this. I'm taking Georgia. I love Canada, Vancouver, beautiful city. I highly recommend anyone that's traveling into North America, go visit Vancouver. It's amazing. Vancouver's not going to save them. Okay, Georgia's on them. Georgia wins that match. Also, I know everyone's really excited because the new Frankenstein movie came out on Netflix, and I know that's I think over in Romania. You know what though? U.S. Is going to win that match, so
no doubt.
Frankenstein's not going to save Romania either.
I agree.
Um, Spain plays England A. You can't lose that match, Spain. Come on, that's the England's young guys. So,
The Irish young guns gave them a bit of a beating this week, unfortunately. It's yeah, that's a good England team too. It's a good England team. It'll be a
all
really
right,
fun match though. Be a really
all
fun
right. Now
match.
let's get into the Autumn Nation Series matches. Okay, so Italy played South Africa this summer. It did not go well at all. Is there anything that could be different at the Italian version of a land stadium?
All I would say, if you remember that test, now bearing in mind Italy sent a second team down to Australia, they to South Africa, sorry, they pushed the Box hard in the first one, didn't go well in the second one, but they pushed them hard.
No.
This is going to be, look, the Box are going to win. Let's make no mistake about that. The Box are not going to let this one slip, but Italy will put up a decent fight here. They got plenty of talent now, so. Now, Italy putting up a decent fight doesn't mean that they finish within 15 points, for example. I think the Box beat them by 15, but it'll be a good match. It'll be a good test match.
Yeah, I think the Bucks are going to win that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next game I'm going to pick, I hope New Zealand drinks all the coffee in the world at 10:10 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm picking the All Blacks to beat England. I think that's going to happen. Last week I said I thought that England had a better chance than anyone else to actually get to the number one ranking in the Springboks. Uh, you're not going to get to the number one ranking if you can't beat New Zealand. But look, I'm sold. Uh, I think New Zealand's going to win this match. No Jordy Barrett. That'll eventually have to come back and hurt them at some point. But didn't hurt them against Scotland. Yeah, they still got a lot of great players. We'll see, but I think England though coming into this match probably one of the first times in a very long time when in a non-South Africa match that New Zealand has been probably the heavy underdog. I would say in this match, but I'm
Yeah.
picking the All Blacks.
Yeah. No, I can see it. And you're almost swaying me, but I'm going to stick with my gut and think England get a big signature win here. What's that? 9 on the bounce so far at the moment. So 9 wins in a row for them. This will be the big 10. Oh, God. Yeah, no, it's tight. I'm going to go with England over the All Blacks, but I could see it going either way. I'm going to go England by 3 points here.
Okay, book it. All right.
And
Well,
I'm
we're not.
Irish, so I don't want to be accused of bias, Northern Hemisphere bias here.
All right. Does Japan beat Wales or does Wales come up with a win here?
Wales beat Japan. I saw a lot in that Welsh performance against Argentina to think that they get the job done. Now, look, Jack Morgan's a massive loss. Make no mistake, he's phenomenal, and he's right up there with the best open sides in the world. But I think Wales have enough to get by Japan, and I actually think they'll do it relatively comfortably. Now, Japan looked good against Ireland, but I think Wales they'll go to the power game and they'll get over Japan.
Yeah, I agree. I think Wales beats Japan there. Okay, 3:10 Eastern Time, Avia Stadium, Dublin, Ireland versus Joe Schmidt's Australia team. I'm going to start it off. I'm taking the Wallabies. All right. I think Ireland takes another loss here. I think they're playing the wrong lineup. I think they brought in the wrong team for this Autumn Nations. I think that Australia is has suffered some pretty bad losses in this round, but we're getting to the end here on the Joe Schmidt tenure. I think that they're going to come out and they're going to play. And what a end to his career coaching Australia for Joe Schmidt to go to a place where he essentially built this era of Ireland and win. Now, we'll see, but as you can tell, I was just not impressed by Ireland's match against Japan, and we'll see. So I'm taking the Wallabies here in the massive upset.
Yeah, fair enough, Joe. Big call. And it's been really nice doing podcasts with you, but I hereby resigning on the spot. Yeah, no, I actually, I think Ireland, Joe Schmidt, if anyone's going to pick Ireland apart, Joe Schmidt's the man to do it. But I think Ireland have too much. If you were telling me it was the Wallabies mid rugby championship when they didn't have tons of injuries, it would have been a tight match. But I actually think, and I'm not 100% confident on Ireland, but I think Ireland actually beat them by about 10 points just because I'm so much less confident about the Wallabies. And I actually think there's enough in this Irish team when you look at them. if they make a couple of selection calls, which I'm never confident with Farrell that he will do, but there's a couple of selection calls that make a big difference. And if Ireland sort out their line out, which again is a big if, I think they could beat the Wallabies fairly handily. So I'm going to go Ireland by 10. And
Well,
you know
hey,
me, Joe,
look,
I never pick against Ireland.
using my brain to pick, I'm probably thinking it's a 10-point Ireland win. But using my heart and being an old newspaper guy like myself, I'm going for the narrative, and I think it's going to be Wallabies by a field goal.
A man with the surname Harrington going for the Wallabies and not Ireland. I
I know my
honestly,
wife is
Joe.
so mad at me. My son is a giant Ireland rugby fan too. He's two, but he carries his Irish rugby ball all around the house. I'm just gonna have to watch him. He's not gonna be happy. He
Teddy can
watches
never
this
see this
podcast.
video, unfortunately.
Yeah. All
Oh my
right.
god.
The last match on the last big match on Saturday, 3:10 Eastern, same time as Ireland Australia. Man, World Rugby, come on, we got to do better with these
Yeah.
times here. So
Flex
these
these
matches
out.
don't
Come on.
France, Fiji. Uh, Come on, France by quite a bit would be my pick.
Oh, I thought Fiji looked good though. Yeah, no, France
Oh,
win,
they
but
did.
I think it's gonna be a really fun match. The problem for France is they can't get put lured into playing a wide game against this Fijian team because they'll get hurt. Yeah, I think France win, but I think it'll be like the England Fiji game where it'll be quite tight for the first hour. Um, and yeah, I wasn't. I was. You talk about not being impressed with Ireland. I wasn't impressed with France really in that last. You know, they just their heads dropped and they're quite capable of just switching off. So
So,
yeah, France
so
by a
you're
bit, but
okay, but you think there could be a hangover,
I
a
think
France
so.
hangover
Yeah,
on
I
this?
think so. They built up that match so much as like, oh, the Springboks stole the World Cup from us. They did this, they did that, and then it's a completely no show against a 14-man side is in the second half is quite something. So yeah, France to win, but Fiji to make them work for it.
All right, and then the last big Autumn Nation Series match of the weekend. This is at 10:10 Eastern Time. Of course, all these Autumn Nation Series matches are going to be streaming on Peacock. We have Scotland hosting Los Pumas of Argentina. Philip, who do you have in this one?
Los Pumas,
God,
Los Pumas.
are we gonna? Okay, we're gonna be
I've
different
I've
on
gone
this
back and
one. Not
forth. I've
so fast. I'm also picking Los Pumas. I think that we are gonna have a Scottish hangover. As
yeah.
impressed as I was against when Scotland played the U.S., not beating the All Blacks, I think there's going to be a bit of a hangover. And I think that Argentina, look, that's still a team that beat the All Blacks earlier this year. They beat Australia in one of the matches. They played the All Blacks, or they played the Springboks pretty tough
Mm. In Twickenham,
at
yeah.
times. Definitely in Twickenham, although it never felt like that game was close, but it actually was close.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I'm taking Argentina in this one. Um, Apologies to Scotland, although I love their team and I just think that Argentina's bigger and stronger. We've talked about this in the past, but I think that Argentina is probably second only to South Africa in terms of their power game and who they have there, and I think that's going to really affect Scotland.
Yeah, I agree. And for the same sort of reason, I think, look, if Scotland win, I wouldn't be shocked. I definitely wouldn't be shocked. They've got so much quality across the board, but I just think when it comes down to it, the power game, I just think Argentina have that edge on them. And they've got a sparkling backline too. So yeah, it's gonna be a cracker, but I think Argentina get it done.
All right. Okay. Another great week of rugby in the books. Here's another reminder that on November 29th, Saturday, we're doing a live uh, athletes lounge for the Munster Stormers match, big URC match. It's the only round that the URC is in this month. And then, after that, they come back, URC plays for a week, and then it's Champions Cup season.
The big one. The big
It's
one.
Champions Cup season.
I love
Champions
it.
Cup season starts on Flow. Well, does it ever really end? It really starts this week because we are going to start our daily countdown and our preview. And I'll do a little tease, Philip. I'm writing little pieces of why each team in Champions Cup can win it. There are some tough ones to write there,
I was going to
right?
say I can't wait to read them, but there are some hard sells there, Joe.
Look, there are some hard sells. Sorry,
Yeah.
Gloucester. There's a hard sell there. Scarlets, I love you. I can't wait to write that one. Haven't written it
Yeah.
yet. But we will start with an easy one to write, which was Bath Rugby. Will kick us off 3 weeks out. So stay tuned for that. Keep watching FloRugby. Again, we have Georgia, Canada on the platform this weekend. Should be a really good match. We'll see if Georgia can hang on and keep their momentum going. Phil, as always, great podcasting with you.
Thanks, Joe. Love chatting rugby with you, mate.
All right. Watch rugby this weekend.